Okay, good. We're on 135, and the topic of this stop is going to be all kinds of different cases of safek. If you're not sure if a baby needs a brit milah or not for various reasons, if they're born with some kind of birth defect, or if they're born cesarean, or if they have a status of a servant, cases like that where it's not clear whether one needs to do a brit milah or not. Even if you do a brit milah, since in these cases it's not for sure, so then the question is, can you do it on Shabbat if eighth day is Shabbat, right? So generally, if you don't really need to do a brit milah, if you're only doing it out of safek, you can't violate Shabbat to do brit milah on the eighth day if it's not for sure that you have to do the brit milah. Okay, so that will encompass all different cases today. And it picks up off of the Mishnah, Safek ve'androginos. So we start with the Baraita. It says, Tanu Rabbanan, Orlato vadai dochat Shabbat, velo Safek dochat Shabbat. Since the pasuk says, right, besar orlato, if he has a definite foreskin that has to be cut, then that overrides Shabbat, but not otherwise. Okay, that line looks like it's a general clause, an introduction, and then it's going to give some specific examples. But the Talmud in a minute is going to ask what this general clause also comes to include. So it'll include, we'll see, a baby that's born in the 8th month. Okay, so now we get to the examples. Orlato vadai docha et Shabbat velo androginos docha et Shabbat. So one application is that not someone who's born with both signs, male and female. So since they're not for sure male, so will do the brit milah on his male member, but since it's safek, not on Shabbat. The Yehuda Omer androginos dochet Shabbat ve'anush karet. He disagrees with Tanna Kama and says you do have to. The androginos does have to do brit milah for sure. And he does it therefore even on Shabbat, and if he doesn't do it, he will get the punishment of karet. So he's like, for sure you got to do it. Or la tova dai dochet Shabbat, velo nolad ben hashemashot dochet Shabbat. A second application then is someone who's born during ben hashemashot, let's say on Friday afternoon or Saturday afternoon, and so you're not sure if he's born on Shabbat for sure. 8th day will be on Shabbat, you do a brit milah on Shabbat. But if it's a few minutes before Shabbat or a few minutes after and you're not sure if Shabbat started yet, within those 13 or 20 minutes, then you have to push it off because you're not sure. This actually, this has been a lot of cases that this has come up, and sometimes it's really down to the wire, and this is where people's opinion about now you can be mahmir and say, okay, Shabbat we'll end it after 35, 42, 72 minutes. And so you could be mahmir. But in this case, if you're very mahmir, then if a baby's born during that time period, you're going to end up pushing it off. So it ends up being kula. Okay, that's second application. If someone's born without a foreskin, can happen. And so then there's nothing to cut. So then you will not do brit milah on Shabbat. Well, there is no brit milah to do. But we're talking about hatafat dam berit. If there's no foreskin, you still have to draw some blood. You just prick and draw a drop of blood. Bet Shammai omrim sarich latif menu dam berit. Bet Hillel omrim eno sarich. Bet Shammai thinks you still do. Even if there's no foreskin, you still have to do that. Bet Hillel says you do not have to. And so this principle that you do not have to do it follows Bet Hillel. And this hatafa, even if you would do it, you would not do it on Shabbat, because drawing blood is melacha.
So the principle follows Bet Hillel. So
Stam follows Bet Hillel, correct.
So what's the point of the application here if the only possible application would be under Bet Shammai and Bet Shammai doesn't follow the
right? So that's a great question. Would the application follow both? That even Bet Shammai, who says you do it, would agree that you don't do it on Shabbat? Or Bet Shammai would say you even do it on Shabbat, and Bet Hillel says you don't have to do it, therefore don't do it on Shabbat for sure, but you can do it. Okay, that it's confusing, And you're right to be confused. And actually, the next few lines we're going to see are going to be different discussions about this exact point. So you're correct to pick up on that. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. So this is now the second opinion. Lo nechleku bet Shammai bet Hillel el nolad keshehu mahul shesarich latif menu dam berit. No, he says, Bet Shammai bet Hillel do not disagree about that. They agree that someone who is born without a foreskin, you still have to take dam berit because it simply means that the foreskin is concealed. There is a foreskin there; it's just attached, and so you have to take. Well, you can't cut anything because it's attached, but you still have to take the blood. Everyone agrees. So al ma nechleku, what do they disagree about? Al ger shintkayen kishu mahul. Shabbat Shammai omerim tzarich latif menu dam berit. Bet Hillel omerim en tzarich latif menu dam berit. If someone had a bri milah, maybe they're Muslim and they had bri milah already, and then now they come to convert to Judaism. So since they already had bri milah, Bet Hillel says you don't. That's it. They did a bri milah. You don't have to do it again. You don't have to even take the blood. Bet Shammai says you do have to. But in the case of someone born without a foreskin, everyone, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, he's more machmir. He says everyone would agree that you have to take a drop of blood. Okay, that's the end of the Baraita with two basic opinions: the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar being more machmir. Okay, now we're going to analyze it. Amar Mor, you just said velo safek tochet Shabbat. The first line, which I said is an introductory general line. But now the Talmud is going to ask, what specific cases are coming to include the principle of omni-significance? If a baby is born, obviously 9-month-old baby is regular baby, and so it's born on Shabbat, we violate Shabbat in order to take care of it. Also, if it's a preemie and born in the 7th month, we also violate Shabbat to take care of the preemie. However, there's a halacha that if it's born after 8 months from the time of conception, then we do not violate Shabbat. There was a conception, this was found in Greek medicine also, it's found in Aristotle, that an 8-month-old baby cannot survive. 7 yes, and 9 yes, but not 8. It's a very strange thing, but the rabbis didn't make it up, they just took it from the Greeks. Where the Greeks get it from? Most likely, this is what happened is that 9 months survived. Probably any preemie, they didn't have good technology to keep them alive. Probably when it's the 7th month, it means that it was conceived out of wedlock, and then by the time the 3rd month came and they had to rush to get married, so they called it a 7-month-old baby. And so there were some 7-month-old babies that were passed, whereas 8 months would fall in between because usually you'd wait 3 months before she knew that she was pregnant and start showing. So anyway, that's one theory about how this whole thing came about in Greek medicine. But anyway, this was the widespread idea. And so the rabbis felt that since there's no such thing as an 8-month baby and it can't survive, therefore you don't violate Shabbat because it's not going to live anyway. Now, Safek ben Shiva, Safek ben Shimona, en mechalelin alavet Shabbat. If you're not sure if it's a 7-month or 8-month-old baby, then when you can't, and the 8th day comes, you can't do the bri milah on Shabbat because perhaps if it's a 7-month baby, we would do it. But if it's an 8-month baby, we don't do anything. We don't violate Shabbat, and therefore you do bri milah, but you wouldn't violate Shabbat on the 8th day in order to do it. Okay. By the way, in practice, I don't think they ever let an 8-month baby die. They usually assume that we're not sure exactly how to calculate. Maybe it was a few days earlier or later. And so I don't think anyone suffered too much because of this halacha. But certainly today would not be applicable. Okay, so Ben Shimona Harehu Ke'even Vasula Tel Telo. Not only that, not only can't you violate Shabbat, but 8-month-old baby is mukseh, right? It's like a rock. You can't even move it around. It's just, it's not going to live. But the mother can lean over even without moving it and nurse it, but that's because of the danger to the mother that if she doesn't nurse, and she will feel pain. Okay, so that first line in the Baraita that says not safek, the safek is talking about safek if it's 7th month or 8th month. We do not do bri milah on Shabbat. Okay, that concludes that question. Now, Itmar. Rav Amar halacha ketanakama, Ushmuel Amar halacha keRabbi Shimon ben Elazar. This is regarding someone, a child is born without a foreskin. Rav is Mekel and says you don't have to do anything. We follow Tanakama, and according to Tanakama, according to Bet Hillel, you don't have to do hatafat dambarit. Shemuel says halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. According to that, even Bet Hillel agrees you have to do hatafat dambarit. The question is, do you have to do it on Shabbat or not? Okay, so that's the two halachot, Rav and Shemuel. Now we have a somewhat sad story. Rav Ada bar Ahava itilid le'ahu yinuka kishu mahul. So he had a baby that had no foreskin. Other than Midrash, there's a few people like Yaakov Avinu who were born mahul. It's considered a great thing, a great tzaddikim that they didn't need to be perfected; they were already born perfect. So, not necessarily it's nice. They turned a birth defect into something positive. Okay, so we had a child like this, and Rav Ada wanted to do hatafat dambarit, but it was born on Shabbat. The 8th day was on Shabbat. So hadre atilesar mohale. So he went to 13 different mohalim, and nobody would do it. They all were of the opinion that you don't have to do it, and therefore you don't do it on Shabbat. So Rav Ada said, I have to do it myself. And Rav Ada was not an expert at it. He was not a mohel himself, and he therefore cut his son too much and caused him to be kirut shofcha. So that's a sad outcome. Actually, this is better than in the Talmud Yerushalmi. Another version of the story is that he killed his son. So at least over here, the son survives, but it was mutilated. Okay, so he said in reaction, Amar tetili de abri de Rab. Says, I deserve this because I violated Rab. I went against Rab. Now remember, says halachas like Tanakama, according to whom for Bet Hillel says you don't have to do hatafat dambarit. So if you don't have to do it, you certainly can't violate Shabbat. And now he went and violated Shabbat against Rav, and so he says, "Oh, I got what was coming to me." Okay, that's the story. Now the Gemara asks, "Amale Rav Nachman, bad Shmuel la'avar." Hold on, you didn't only violate Rav, you also violated Shmuel, some friend, right? Even worse. Emar Dama Shemuel Behol B'Shabbat Mi Amar. When Shemuel said that halacha is like this opinion here, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, when he's quoting Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel about whether you have to do hatafat dambarit, that was talking about a weekday. And Bet Hillel says you have to do it, and Bet Hillel says you don't have to do it. Bet Shammai says you have to do it. But on Shabbat, everyone agrees that you don't do it. It's not for sure. And so since you did it on Shabbat, you violated Shemuel as well. Emar Dama Shemuel Bechol B'Shabbat Mi Amar. Right. Who Sabad? However, Rav Ada thought that Vadai or La Kibushahi, that for sure that when it's born that way, it has a foreskin, but the foreskin is hidden, and so therefore it's a Vadai that you have to do a Brit Milah, and you would do it even on Shabbat, and that's how he interpreted Shemuel. Ditmar Rabba Amar Hashinan Shema Orla Kibushahi. Rabbi Yosef Amar Vadai Orla Kibushahi. And when we that this machloket is parallel to another two Amoraim, that Rabba says we suspect perhaps there is a foreskin, but it's hidden. But that's only perhaps, so you might take down berit, but you wouldn't do it on Shabbat. And Rabbi Yosef says for sure every baby is born with a foreskin, but it's attached, it's hidden. And so he would say for sure, then therefore you do it even on Shabbat. Okay, so we have two opinions here. Rav Nachman saying, and the Rabbah saying it's not for sure, and so therefore we don't do it on Shabbat. Whereas Rav Ada interprets Shemuel along with Rav Yosef that you definitely do have to do it on Shabbat. There is some kind of foreskin. All right, we're going to try to prove it now. Rav Yosef, who said the last opinion that for sure you have to do it even on Shabbat. Mina amin Allah. How do I know this? From Baraita, the Tanya. It's not clear if this Baraita is a continuation of the one before, which is what the Geonim say, or if it's a separate Baraita, which is what Rashi says. Okay, I'm going to try to interpret it like the Geonim. Rabbi Eliezer HaKapar Omer, Lo nechliku bet Shammai o bet Hillel al nolad kishu machol, shesarich latif mimenu dam berit. Actually, everyone agrees, Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, that if it's born without a foreskin, you do have to take דם בדית. אמר נחלקו לחלל אב את השבת. Bet Shammai אומרים מחלין אב את השבת, ובית הלל אומרים אין מחלין אב את השבת. Okay, so you see that this is progressively more mahmir than the opinion before. And so here, for sure you have to do it. The question is, do you do it on Shabbat or not? And here, Bet Hillel says, you don't do it דם בדית on Shabbat. So now, since he says that, so if that's what he says here, then for sure that this is what the machloket is here. He's more mahmir. So for sure, the previous opinion was that you do violate Shabbat for it, and everyone would agree with that, Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, which means that's for sure a hidden foreskin. And this proves Rav Ada, right? When he did the circumcision on Shabbat to his son, he's not following Rabbi Eliezer HaKappa's opinion, although he could be. He's not because here Bet Hillel says en mechalel Shabbat, but we're just rather using this as a proof that the previous one had to be different. If Rabbi Eliezer HaKappa says, as opposed to the previous opinion, that here you don't mechalel Shabbat, that means the previous opinion was different. That there you do mechalel Shabbat. Okay, so that's Rabbi Yosef's proof. Now we question it and we come back and forth. The Dilma Tanakama Dibra Kol en mechalin ka'amar. No, maybe the previous opinion said, according to Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, you do not violate Shabbat, right? And that's what Shemuel meant. And here, the Rabbi Eliezer HaKappa says, oh, it's a machloket, and one opinion says that you do violate Shabbat. In other words, Bet Shammai, mechalin of Shabbat, right? Maybe it's the opposite way. I know it has to be different, but who says it's different this way? Maybe it's different in the opposite direction. But we reject that. If so, then the only thing he's coming to saying new is that Bet Shammai thinks that you mechalin Shabbat. He's not saying anything new for Bet Hillel. And so why would he be doing that? But we answer that too. No, it's still important to know that Bet Hillel, whether it's unanimous or whether Bet Hillel disagrees about that point. And so maybe that's why he said it. In any case, there's no proof either way. Therefore, from the continuation of the Beraita, what the beginning of the Beraita meant. So the Beraita is ambiguous whether or not it means you do Hatafat דם B'dit on Shabbat or not. Okay, now we get to a new topic. Amar Rabbi Aseh, Kol she'imo teme'a leda, nimol lishmona. V'chol she'en imo teme'a leda, en nimol lishmona. Generally, if a Jewish woman gives birth in a regular way, she becomes tameh. If it's a boy, for 7 days. If it's a girl, for 14 days. So, therefore, any Jewish woman that gives birth naturally, if it's a boy, you do brit milah on the 8th day. But if she doesn't become tameh, how could that be? One case would be if it's a Cesarean section. So she does not become tameh because she did not give birth. Isha ki tazriya v'yalada zachar, and not through a Cesarean section. They had Cesarean section in those days. Unfortunately, in those days when they had to do it, it means that the mother was not likely to live. Okay, so that's one case. So if a baby was born on Shabbat, not naturally, then you would not do the brit milah. That is halacha l'maaseh, by the way, even today. Cesarean section, you do not do brit milah on Shabbat. Another case where this could happen is if the mother was not Jewish at the time of birth and then was converted after she gave birth. So someone who's not Jewish, the whole laws of Tumah and Tahara do not apply, so she would not be tameh. And then if you convert the baby or the mother afterwards, you would not do it on the 8th day. Okay, we'll see both of those cases are going to come up. Now, how do we know this? Shneimar, Isha ki tazriya v'yaleda zachar v'tamea v'gomer v'bayom hashemini yimol besar orlato. So therefore, you see, only if she's tazriya in a regular way and she becomes tameh, the tamea, if she becomes tameh, then yom hashemini yimol besar orlato. Otherwise, you don't do it. Have to do it on the 8th day. So you could do it on the 8th day, but not if it's Shabbat. Okay, so that's what Rabbi Aseh says. Amar le'Abaye, Torot Rishonim yochichu she'en imo teme'a le'eda v'nimol lishmona. This is a very interesting conversation. He says, hold on, the early generations before Matan Torah, right? Avraham already, he's doing it, they're all doing it on the 8th day. And their mother, the mothers of those babies were not tameh, right? Because they didn't have Matan Torah yet, so they didn't know this law, and yet they did it on the 8th day. And apparently, even if it was Shabbat, maybe you could say they didn't have Shabbat either, but okay. But what's the significance of the 8th day? Was significant already before Matan Torah. So Amale nitena Torah v'nitchadesha halacha. Now it doesn't matter. Once the Torah is given, then the law renews. The way it was done before. In other words, Matan Torah doesn't add another layer to what was before, but rather replaces everything that came before. So you can't use as a precedent any way that that Torah law was kept before Matan Torah. The new is a different system altogether. I think this is a fascinating machloket here, and you can imagine how many different applications one could bring to this. Okay, certainly it's certainly different from the opinion you see a lot Midrash as well, and even Second Temple literature, that Davot kept all the mitzvot. Right here, not only did they not keep all the mitzvot, but it's not even the mitzvot that they kept were not even a precedent or can have continuity with Matan Torah. All right, so that's very interesting halacha. Okay, anyway, now that Abaye said this, right? Okay, so then we established that. Ini, hold on, is this true that that someone who is a mother who is not tameh, that you would not do the brit milah on the 8th day on Shabbat? V'haitamar, Yoseh dofen, u'mi sheyesh lo sheteh orlot, Rav Huna v'Rab Chiya bar Arav. Chad amar mechalelin davet Shabbat, v'chad amar en mechalelin. Someone who comes out of the side, in other words, Cesarean section, or someone who has two members, two foreskins. So there's machloket. One says you would violate Shabbat, the other says you don't. Now, although they have a disagreement about whether you violate Shabbat, okay, maybe you do it on Shabbat, maybe you don't, but wouldn't they agree that you would do it on the 8th day? So why are you saying that if the mother's not tameh, I don't do it on the 8th day? Here, the mother's not tameh, Cesarean section, and yet, right, it seems everyone agrees that you do it on the 8th day. They just disagree about whether on Shabbat or not. Answer is these two halachot are dependent on each other. If you need to do it on the 8th day, then you violate Shabbat, and if you don't have to do it on the 8th day, then you don't violate Shabbat. So the second opinion, whoever it is that says you don't violate Shabbat, would also say you don't need to do it on the 8th day. Okay, so we see that is in fact a machloket. Now this machloket between we had it already here between the Aseh and Abaye on the one hand, and the same machloket between Rav Huna and Rabbi Chiya bar Rav, right? Is also a machloket among two Tanaim already. Okay, so let's see. This is a complicated baraita, and it will take us till the rest of the daf. Yesh yilid bayit shenimol lechad, ויש יליד בית שנימול לשמונה. יש מקנת כסף שנימול לאחד, יש מקנת כסף שנימול לשמונה. So there's 4 different cases here, and actually these 4 cases all come straight out of Bereshit Yud Zayin, where it says, "Uben shemonat yamim yimol lachem kol zachar ledorotechem." 4 generations, 8th day, you have to circumcise every male, and it adds yilid bait umiknat kesef. What's the difference? Yilid bait means a baby that was born within your household, not necessarily your biological son, but even that of a servant. Anyone within the household has to get circumcision. And also miknat kesef, anyone who you buy. They weren't born in your household, but you bought them, and so that person also has to get circumcision. I think that's actually quite fascinating that it's not just about a family member, but your entire household, including servants, also become part of the berit and would eat korban pesach and all that. Mikol ben echad asher lo mizarachahu, even though they're not your biological children, and they're nechad, still they received brit milah. And this pasuk is talking about it on the 8th day. The next pasuk says himol yimol yilid betecha umiknat kaspecha, and now this repeats. You definitely have to do brit milah to anyone born in your house or anyone who you acquire, and so on. And so you see that since it's repeated, This is talking about 8th day. And the next pasuk, the Gemara is saying, is that not on the 8th day, on the first day it's born, or whenever. Okay, so now we have, these are the 4 cases, and we want to try to identify when each of the 4 cases would apply. So we just said that we have all these 4 cases. Now we're going to start backwards with the second 2. Yesh miknat kesef shenimol echad, yesh miknat kesef shenimol lishmona. Kesad, how so? Lakach shivcha me'oberet, v'achar kach yaleda. Zehu miknat kesef shenimol lishmona. If I acquired a maidservant who was pregnant already, and then she gives birth while she's in my household, this is miknat kesef, someone acquired, and that would be on the 8th day. Just by acquiring her, she has the status of being semi-Jewish. Whereas if I acquire a mother and the baby who's already born, so let's say I acquire them right the day after she gives birth. So then I would do Brit Milah, and that would be 1 day old. And these are both people that are acquired. How about the other case? Yesh yilid bayit shenimol lishmona kesad. By the way, we skipped yilid bayit of 1 day. We're going to come back to that, but we don't have it yet. We skipped it. Kesad lakach shivcha v'nit'abera etzlo v'yalda. Zeh yilid bayit shenimol lishmona. If I acquired a maidservant who was not pregnant and she became pregnant under the house, in the household, and so that would be yilid bayit. And since that maidservant has a status of being semi-Jewish, once they go free, they're fully Jewish. So they need Brit Milah, and that would be on the 8th day. Okay, that's Tana Kama. We have another opinion of Rav Hama. This is very interesting because Rav usually means it's for someone from Bavel, because they didn't have official semicha. Rabbi means someone from Eretz Israel. All Tanaim that we know of always are Rabbi, right? Because they're all from Eretz Israel. We know about Hillel. We saw the Natan Habavli came from Bavel, but then they're in Eretz Israel. This is pretty unique. I think it's only a couple of other times that we have in a Baraita Rav Chama, which may indicate that this was a Tana recorded in a Baraita who was from Bavel. Okay, I think that's really cool and interesting. Or it might just be a typo. Okay, Rav Chama Omer ילדה ואחר כך הטבילה, זהו יליד בית שנימול לאחד. הטבילה ואחר כך ילדה, זהו יליד בית הנימול לשמונה. So now hold on, just by acquiring a maidservant, she doesn't get the status of already becoming Jewish to the point that you do Brit Milah. She has to do Tevilah also. So if I which case is it? Yeah. So yilid bayit. So if I acquire this woman and she gets pregnant and gives birth first, and then she goes to the mikveh, so then the baby was not born yet within the berit because she didn't do tevilah. So that baby would do Brit Milah on the first day or any day. It's Milah, but if she went to the mikveh first and then she gave birth, well then she gives birth where already she's entered the berit. And then she gets the 8th day. Okay, that's the end of the Baraita. Now, look at this. Tanakama, la shani le ben hitbila, v'achar kach yalda, ben yalada, v'achar kach hitbila. Only Rav Chama makes a distinction between whether she does Tevilah first or not. Tanakama, doesn't matter to him whether she does Tevilah or not. But if she didn't do Tevilah yet, she would not be tameh because she doesn't enter into the mitzvot that would apply. And so the whole laws of Tumah wouldn't apply to her. And yet, you do Brit Milah even on the 8th day. So here you go. Here's an exception to the rule that we stated before. And this is we said Ketana'eh. So you see the Machloket Tanaim. According to Rav Chama, the rule does apply. Only when she would become tameh when she gives birth, then you do Brit Milah on the 8th day. Whereas according to Nakama, you do Brit Milah on the 8th day, even though she is not tameh. Okay, Amar Rava, Bishlama Rabbi Chama. By the way, here you have Rabbi Chama. Okay, so I didn't check the manuscripts to see if this is consistent or not. Okay, but we can check. So Bishlama Rabbi Chama Mashkachat La Yilid Bayit Nimol Echad. Yilid Bayit Nimol Lishmona. Okay, we've established that there's a Machlokes Tanaim, but now we're going back and we want to analyze all the cases. So we see the Bich Chama has all four cases, right? And so you can have someone who's born within your household that you get Brit Milah one day. Someone born within the household gets Brit Milah on the 8th day. And you also have Miknat Kesef No Lachad, Miknat Kesef Simon Lishmona. You have all four cases. Let's go through them. If someone got pregnant and gave birth while she was in the household, and she went to the mikveh, she delayed the mikveh only after she gave birth, then the baby would be on the first day. Meaning you don't have to wait till the 8th day. It's not a Jewish, it's just like semi. But she did go to mikveh first and then gave birth, and that kid is within the brit. Good. Those are the two cases we saw. Miknat kesef nimol lishmona kigon shelakach shivcha me'oberet v'itbila. This is a typical case we said before. If I acquired a maidservant while she was pregnant, and she went to the mikveh and only afterwards gave birth, then that will be on the 8th day, even though I acquired her while she was pregnant. Doesn't matter. She went to the mikveh. Miknat kesef nimol le'achad. How would you have a case of where I acquire someone and it's on and you do Brit Milah on the first day? Well, we already saw this above. It means, right? We saw a case above that it means that you acquire the person after they gave birth, and I'm acquiring the mother and the baby at once. So the baby was already born, that'll be on the first day. But here we have that is a possible solution even for Rav Chama, but the Gemara gives a different, more complicated case. We'll see why, because they're going to need this case for the next line. For example, if we split it, if I buy the baby and someone else buys the mother, and then she gives birth, so I only have ownership over the baby and not the mother. So since they're split, the baby is not born in with the same status as the mother, and so therefore that will be one day. Okay, that's a more complicated case. So anyway, according to Rav Chama, you have all four cases. Ela v'tanakama b'shlama kuluhu mashkachad lehu. Ela yilid bayit nimol le'achad hechi mashkachad da. So Tanakama, we already went through the three cases, but remember we skipped one. How do you have a case of yilid bayit, someone who's born within the household, but that would be only the first day? Because in that case, she became pregnant, she gave birth within the household. And and the Tanakama doesn't require Tevilah. So, why would you not do it on the 8th day? It's talking about a case where I acquire the maidservant only for its fetus. I'm not acquiring the mother, but I'm just getting like advanced rights to the fetus, and therefore, again, since the fetus does not have the same ownership as the mother, it does not acquire that status, identity status. Okay, in general, there's machlokes and other things in other economies. If I buy the interest of something, is it like I bought the principal also? So this would make sense according to the opinion that says I can separate it, I can own the interest without owning the principal. But what about the other opinion that says buying the interest means I have a stake in the principal also, and you can't separate them? So then, even getting rights to the fetus means I also have some connection and ownership to the mother as well. So then the identity would go from the mother to the baby. So we have a second answer. When I make a condition, it says I'm acquiring this maidservant on condition that I will not go immerse her ever, right? So in that case, that maidservant would never have the status of Shivcha Kenani, to eventually, if she's freed, would become Jewish, but remains in the status of Nochriya, and therefore her children also would remain in that status. So even Tanakama would agree that if I make a specific statement saying that she is not going to become part of the household and part of the Berit, and she does not, and in that case, I would not do Brit Milah on the 8th day, but rather only on the 1st. And so the next line, we're already going to the next topic, which we'll continue tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen, amen. Thank you all for joining.